and a warm welcome to the AI with Arun Show. What if your company could connect every AI model, database, and enterprise tool securely all through one open source gateway? Can one protocol become the foundation for how enterprises safely adopt AI at scale? To address this and much more, we are joined by Shannon Williams, who is the co-founder and president of Obat.ai, a company pioneering open source infrastructure for secure and scalable enterprise AI. Before Obat.ai, Shannon co-founded Rancher Labs, one of the most successful Kubernetes management platform. So Shannon, a very warm welcome to the show.
Hi, Arun. Thanks for having me. It's great to be here.
Excellent. Shannon, let's get started. So explain to our viewers in simple terms what Obat.ai does and why it matters for companies using AI.
Yeah, Obot delivers an open source MCP gateway, and an MCP is the Model Context Protocol. If you're not familiar with it, it's an incredibly fast-growing approach for connecting apps and data and tools to LLMs. And so at Obot, we've built an open source project that really sits at the control plane level for managing what is an explosion of MCP servers in lots of organizations. So as teams have looked to build MCP servers, connect them to all their apps and data, it opens up a lot of questions about who can use them, what kind of audit is necessary, what kind of security is necessary around it, and then how do we just get it in the hands of people really quickly and so that they can easily find these MCP servers, provision them, and use them. And so Obot is a software platform that solves that problem. It really makes it easy for organizations to set up an internal MCP gateway to run MCP servers on their own infrastructure. Obot just runs on top of Kubernetes, so you deploy it on a Kubernetes cluster, and then it leverages Kubernetes to run all these MCP servers on demand. And then it connects all of those MCP servers to your users, your agents, to anything that needs to call them. It implements a proxy and a control plane so that you can define who's allowed to access which MCP servers, so that you can put in place filters or guardrails to ensure that the MCP servers are only sending out what you want them to. And you can audit all of it. So it allows you to sort of track those conversations and understand what people are asking of your MCP to ensure that it's performing correctly. So it really solves a lot of the problems that an organization needs to address if they're going to adopt MCP as a standard way of connecting their apps to their users that are consuming LLMs, their chatbots, their open, whatever they're using for chat internally. That's what we're addressing with Obot. We've made it open source, so it's free and easy to use for anybody. And yeah, it's been only in the market for a couple months, but it's really taken off like crazy.
Excellent. Shannon, thank you. Shannon, explain to our viewers, for those who may not be familiar, what is MCP in a layman's term?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, the Model Context Protocol was really only introduced this year, but it is a protocol. So it's a way of communicating that is effectively built so that you can tell an LLM what tools it has available to it and how to use those tools. So most MCP servers are relatively simple. They often connect to databases or application APIs, and where the good ones provide all the context necessary for the models to understand how to use the tool. So for example, let's say I want to build an MCP server that was going to sit in front of an app like Gmail, right? I would want to have tools available in that MCP server that could do things like write an email, send an email, read an email, search my emails, delete an email. And so once I had those, then I could talk to any kind of chat client, your Claude desktops, your chat GPTs, and say, hey, search my email for an email last week about the new shoes I ordered, and find out when they're coming. And by giving it that context of look in my Gmail, it's going to know to call the tools it has available, one of which is a Gmail tool, then to see that it has the ability to search. So it then would, inside of that context, it would tell it, here's the kind of information I need to do a search. And so when it has that context, it allows the LLM to say, oh, cool, I can search this email. And it would have a different tool to search Outlook, and it might have a different tool to search the web, and it might have another tool to write posts to your WordPress blog or to update your X feed if you had API access to X. So you can build tools and to connect to really anything, and they don't have to be APIs, though a lot of them are. You could build tools that talk to databases, that talk to applications. Like you can build applications with its only front end as an LLM, as an MCP. So there's all sorts of ways that people are leveraging this MCP technology to put functionality in the hands of an LLM. And that's becoming, what's nice about it though, is that you could always sort of integrate an LLM with an API. through different types of agent frameworks. Now you have this repeatable approach that is getting supported by most of the clients and most of the app builders, so that you can, find one of these things, use it over and over again. And other people can use it. If you find a good one that works with Chrome, you can use an MCP to drive your browser, right? To go to a website and do something on it. So MCPs have taken off since this technology came about. Anthropic developed it. It's been growing like crazy. And, today there's tens of thousands of MCP servers out on the internet. There are thousands of official MCPs coming from vendors, and this MCP protocol is turning out in a lot of ways to be a bit like HTTP as a protocol we use to pass websites, right? Something that engineers can use to put functionality in the hands of chatbots and AI agents and users consuming, ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or any other kind of chat. So MCP seems to be really gaining a lot of traction as a standard that's going to allow us to build kind of the agentic web or the agentic, platforms that I think a lot of us envision AI turning into.
Yeah. So Shannon, in the case of the enterprise context, right, it looks like, every app or every database that they could you potentially use on MCP. So it looks like there's a lot of connections, calls that are being made. So how do you ensure that there is data and AI systems that are secure and well managed?
Well, it's a lot that goes into that, obviously. But one of the key elements is, first of all, most of these MCPs today are being written by engineers. They're being written and put into GitHub, and they're kind of being run like any other piece of technology. Teams are writing them, they're deploying them into their apps that they're building, and that's it. They're kind of buried. And so organizations are relying on, their existing app development processes to make sure those are secure. And for the most part, the ones that are being built by, your app teams probably are well built, and they're calling APIs, they're using, effective API keys and things like that. The problem is there's loads and loads of MCPs being built out in the wild that organizations are finding coming in the door. And so not just do you have the ones your teams are building, which are kind of buried in GitHub, you also have all the MCPs that people are finding themselves and running on their local Claude desktop, or they're running in their VS Code, or they're connecting to whatever it is that they're using to, consume AI. And so organizations are concerned, right? Their concern is, what if some of these MCPs aren't just friendly, right? What if they're malicious? What if they have, they're scraping my data when I send it? What if they're potentially using the API keys that people are giving them to make unauthorized calls to my applications? So, for IT, like with many big booming technologies, there's this concern that this is the kind of technology that opens up a lot of security holes. And so IT organizations have broadly, and most big companies, they've done things like banned MCPs. Like, you cannot use an MCP servers. You can only use authorized MCP servers if you come to us. And so the adoption has actually been pretty slow in enterprise. You see it growing like crazy among developers and people in their personal universe. But in most enterprise, MCP adoption is very early, very slow. And, the idea of putting it in the hands of business users who might want to talk to their email and might want to talk to their Salesforce and might want to talk to their marketing automation systems and their websites and their HR systems and their all sorts of different things hasn't moved quickly at all. And so that's really been the impetus for organizations to say, oh, we probably need to put in place a management plan. We need to be able to secure these. We need to be able to know about them. We need to be able to audit them. And so that's been the driver for gateways, for, effectively a firewall for all these MCP servers, something that can run them, can make make it obvious to employees which MCPs are authorized. So come here, get the authorized MCP, and then allow the organization to set policy like, okay, these MCPs are available to this group and those are available to that group. And, some of the functions in this, we want to make available to some teams, but not others. We need to audit this. We need to have a history of it. We need to have, give our auditors access to things to double check and make sure that, only the correct type of information is going out through an MCP server. So all of that sort of risk combined with FUD, combined with, potential for risk, has slowed down adoption of MCP in a lot of organizations. So tools like the Obot MCP Gateway allow organizations to take that on head on, define what's approved, and then accelerate adoption, which is, I think, what we all would like to see happen. I think if you're using an LLM and you're just starting to see the potential of it, you can just imagine how powerful it starts to get when you have all sorts of application integrations at your fingertips, all the things you actually do at work. You can have the LLM take on, and it just unlocks a lot of potential productivity improvements.
Yeah. So for all my viewers, this is something that you'll want to take note. If you are interested in LLMs and using the power of LLMs, Shannon has a great product on the MCP gateway, which you could leverage to make sure that it is accessible to all of your enterprise users. So thank you, Shannon. Shannon, so you alluded to earlier that your technology is open source. Why did you choose to make it open source, and how does it benefit developers, enterprises?
The reality is, in this ecosystem, open source is far and away the best approach to getting your product in front of the most people. And as an entrepreneur, multi-time entrepreneur, I found over and over again that open source allows us to iterate infinitely faster than closed source. It means that when we have an idea, we can put it out to the market, we can get feedback, we can get improvements, enhancements as the community adopts it. And so, there are two things about Obot that, kind of differentiate it. There's a lot of different tools coming out that are sort of addressing, kind of trying to provide an MCP registry or a place to find MCPs. And we had what makes Obot quite unique is that, one, it's software. I think almost everything else out in the market is a SaaS service, and most of them, they're really geared around the public community consuming MCPs as opposed to how an organization would run MCPs. But two is that in addition to it being software, it kind of runs on your infrastructure, and running on your infrastructure means you can deploy it behind the firewall. If you're a bank, if you're a government agency, if you're any large company, you can kind of put this into your, closed walled garden, which is important when you're trying to determine, I might want to connect to things that are also behind that closed walled garden. I might need MCP servers that can connect there as well. So being able to sort of run in the most secure environments was pretty important to us. So software was the right choice for Obot. But secondly, in this ecosystem, we've found, over and over again that the easiest way to give organizations like that, the financial services companies and the big government agencies and people who are enormously security concerned, is to make the product open source. So by being open source, it allows them to look right into what we're doing, allows them to take the product, use it for free, decide it's the right product for them. And sometimes that means we never hear from them. They take the product and run. Rancher was a great example of that. Rancher is used today by thousands and thousands of organizations, most of whom we at Rancher Labs, the software company, never even had a relationship with. They ran Rancher for their own purposes. But at the same time, we offered a lot of great enterprise technology around Rancher and support for Rancher, and that worked out beautifully. We built an excellent business that grew really fast, that was enormously profitable. And we're able to compete with companies that were so much bigger than ours. At Rancher, we started, it was just four of us, right? So we're building up momentum, trying to get to market and competing against companies like Red Hat. Open source gave us that opportunity. It allowed us to get momentum and, come out by having the best product. We could kind of compete at the product level. And that's approaching again, is compete at the product level, be open source, let people use it, and see how it gets adopted.
No, that's a great strategy and a very smart one at that. But talking about large enterprises, Shannon, many of the large enterprises use all kinds of software, right? There could be cloud platform, there could be some old legacy models, legacy software. So how does your product Obat.ai work with all of those old systems and the new system and the somewhat newer systems?
Yeah, I mean, the cool thing about MCP is it's actually pretty straightforward. It's not a particularly difficult thing to create. An MCP server is in a lot of ways a description of functionality. It really is, it's a piece of code that describes to an LLM what it can do, and then it has calls out to APIs or to systems or to whatever it is that it needs to execute against. And so you can build an MCP for anything. And we're seeing that already, that MCP servers are not just being, built for, your browser and locals tools, but they're getting built for anything, DoorDashes and AWS and Amazon shopping, and to control your iMessage on your laptop. I mean, you can build MCPs for almost anything that has hooks. And inside of an organization, everything has hooks. That's just the nature of an organization. Like these days, there's very few applications that exist in such a silo that you don't have a way to communicate with them. And so with MCP, the power is really in the protocol. We don't have to do anything special to make MCP work on old applications or old systems or new systems for that matter. Now, we do have to help organizations build MCP servers. And so we do a lot of work with organizations to teach them the best practices. MCP servers are definitely not all created equal. There's a lot of nuance in building good MCP servers and providing layered information for the model to understand the tools that are available to it. And sometimes just pumping all the tools you have on an API into a model is is not the right thing. In fact, most of the time it's not the right thing. So a good way to think about building MCP servers is really to think about how users use the product. So think about the functionality that a user would call. The LLM's probably going to try to do the same type of things. So that might require multiple steps. It might require a little bit of underlying coding to take multiple actions as one thing. But if you do that right, your MCP servers will be a lot more effective. They'll be a lot more accurate, because that's the risk with MCP servers is, does the model, the real question is, does the model use the tool correctly? So testing is important, sampling is important. What's the actual outcome that you're getting when you call the MCP server? Does it do what you thought it would do? So those are kind of where we tend to help a lot. So one thing we do is we ship with a lot of MCPs that are pre-built, some by us, a lot by vendors, but they exist for platforms like Office 365 or Salesforce or Jira, things that are very commonly used by organizations. Some of those have good MCP servers, a lot of them don't. And so, today there's no good Office 365, there's no good Google Workspaces MCP server. So we've had to build those things. So have others. Like if you look at the new tools coming out of OpenAI for ChatGPT, they've had to kind of build their own tools because there really aren't tools yet from those vendors. And it makes sense. If you go look at, Office 365, there's just thousands of API endpoints you could call. Getting it right isn't all that easy. You've got to put some thought into building an MCP for something like Outlook. And so there's a lot of work that we've done to build MCP servers, which are available in Obot. We do a lot of work with companies who are trying to figure out a strategy for building those, to help them figure out how to, build and scale the building of MCP servers.
Yeah, and that sounds like a lot of work, Shannon. What are some of the challenges that you faced while you're trying to make the platform easy and practical for real-world companies, real-world enterprises?
Yeah, there's a lot, right? Like different challenges that we run into. Start with auth, right? Like OAuth is by itself is probably one of the trickier parts of this, because the experience you want is to have the user sort of log in once and then have that auth flow all the way through, so they're able to call the applications that they want to talk to and only get access, obviously, to their resources in there. So if I have access to Salesforce and you have access to Salesforce, it doesn't mean we can see the same things or do the same things, right? We have pretty limited access, but we might be using the same MCP server. So one of the key elements is implementing OAuth and passing through OAuth as we go from you as a user working in a chatbot saying, hey, update my opportunity in Salesforce for this deal I'm working on. We need to tell Salesforce that you're you and you want to access it. We need to have you authenticate in, and then we need to establish that connection and pass that through. So these are things we had to really work very hard on in the process. Building a proxy that would sit between MCP servers was another interesting challenge, because the MCP servers, they really only talk to MCP clients. So as we built this proxy, we had to look and say, okay, what is a proxy in this case? Well, it's actually an MCP server and MCP client on either side to talk to one another. So when you're calling to get an API endpoint or an MCP endpoint, you're hitting the proxy first and then getting authorized and driven back. So there were a lot of technical challenges we had to work through. Our engineers spent a lot of time on things around auth, around making sure the proxy was accurate and fast and could pass through everything necessary. And those have been continued to be areas that we keep working on and improving. I think you're going to find the auth stuff just gets easier and easier over time. There's a lot of interesting work coming on in the community that's around MCP to drive this forward, and we're going to see a lot of improvements there, I think, in the next year.
Yep. No, that makes sense, Shannon. So let's talk about the impact on the future vision. So how are you thinking that AI assistants, AI agents, they will change the way companies work over the next, let's say, few years, 1, 2, 3, 4 years?
Oh, I think it's going to happen really fast. I think we're about to. I think the next year you're going to see an explosion of a new kind of agent that is pretty universal for users. I think it's going to use the MCP protocol. Interestingly, so the one of the interesting things that's happened is there's a lot of companies who saw MCP and were like, oh, fantastic. This is a way we can put our technology into our users' hands and let them use LLMs to leverage it. And so the first approach they made was building an MCP server for their product. So like if I have a ticketing system, I build an MCP server. Now you can attach that to your model and you can say, search for tickets, buy tickets, do transactions. And I think for a lot of companies, that was a really good first step, and they were pretty excited by that. The interesting thing, though, is that it kind of disintermediates them pretty fast. So if you're a software vendor and you want to be part of your user's journey to AI, you want to be there. Like, there's no doubt you want to be in their chat client. You want to be an MCP server. But when you think about that flow, the way that flow works right now is the user says, look for tickets for a Warriors game. And it, if all I have is an MCP server that has a bunch of functions, one of those functions might be search tickets. And so the MCP server, it would say, hey, you want to search tickets? I need this string of information so I can search. And so the client, my ChatGPT would say, oh, okay, let me get that search. He wants to know about Warriors tickets. So that's what tickets. He wants to go this weekend. So those are the dates. Maybe he's looking for something in this price range. There's the price range. So submit that query through to the MCP server, which would call an API and get a response. And I would come back and say, cool, there are tickets available this weekend on this ticketing platform to buy some Warriors tickets for $300. Which is good. But from a client, from the vendor side, if I'm the ticketing platform, all I got was a query. Like, I know that there was a query. I know that the query maybe was tied to a user, but I don't know what that user asked, right? The ask went to the user's LLM, it went to ChatGPT, it went to Claude, it went to whatever they were using, and it figured out what to call. And in the long run, it means that I can only respond data, right? I can only respond with, here are the tickets and what's available. I can't respond with any kind of conversational logic of my own, which means I can't, suggest that the next day they're a lot cheaper, right? I can't look at I can't try to provide an excellent customer experience to that user. All I am is an API endpoint. And so there's another approach that is really just theoretical right now. A lot of people, nobody's really implemented it, but a lot of people are talking about it. We're actually working with a bunch of people to implement this using a project called Nanobot, which is to build your MCP servers as agents themselves. And so in that model, instead of providing an MCP server that produces 10 functions, right? 10 tools that it puts in the hands of the model, you instead build an MCP server that just introduces maybe one function. And that one function is like query or chat or something. And so it says, hey, I'm a chat that can help you with anything to do with tickets. And so when I say, hey, do I have, check my ticketing system to see if they have any tickets for Warriors, it actually passes that whole query through to the MCP server on the other side. But this MCP server, instead of just being a collection of tools, is actually an agent, and it has its own connection to an LLM. So it can read and comprehend that entire query and go through its own system prompt saying, when a customer is looking for tickets, go query to see if they're available, but also query and see if there's any other things like, hey, there's some tickets that are a little bit more expensive, but they're a really good deal. Maybe they'd want those. Or, hey, there's some tickets that are available next week. Or, we can't find anything for this level, but I do have something that's, if you're looking for something fun to do, there's a concert that same night, right? So the ticketing agent is a little different thing than the ticketing MCP server because it has a goal, and its goal is aligned with the company's goal. And so when I want to talk to sort of the company, I probably am okay with that answer because I need to know about the tickets to the Warriors that I want to get. But if it came back and told me, hey, I can get you tickets the next night a lot cheaper, I might be excited to get that information. And so what we're finding is that organizations, they don't want to be disintermediated from that flow. They want to be part of the conversation between the user and the MCP server. And to do that, they have to build something more like an agent. And I think this is true for almost every SaaS company, for almost any web services company, that they want to ensure that they're delivering an awesome client experience to their customers, and they want to be able to shape that conversation to their own business goals. And so my expectation is that we're going to be really quickly seeing the emergence of kind of universal agents for organizations that become almost, they're heavily engineered and very important to their companies, almost as important as their website, maybe more important than their website going forward, in the sense of when I reach out to, at Ticketmaster from my client, Ticketmaster wants to be a full participant in that conversation. They want to know not just who I am and the query details. They want to know what I'm looking for. They want to know as much context. They want to be able to ask qualifying questions. They want to be able to suggest more things. So they want to deliver an awesome experience. And they don't want to just do it, from a little clicky like chat in their website. They want to do it everywhere that I'm chatting. So they want to be on ChatGPT. They want to be on Claude. They'd like to be in Gemini and Siri. They want me to be able to say, at Ticketmaster, at StubHub, whenever I'm asking a question about tickets. And the fact that what I want is probably the same thing too, because what I want to be able to say is like, hey, Gemini, I want to go to the Warriors game tomorrow night, but I don't want to spend more than $250. Check all the ticketing sites and have it send out my query go look at everything, come back to me and say, hey, Shannon, looks like based on all of the conversations, these are the different offers that are available to you. What do you think about these seats? What do you think about these seats? So I want to be able to talk to multiple things, or have Siri, ChatGPT, Gemini, whoever my client is, talk to all these things for me. And they want to be part of those conversations as much as possible. So I think we're heading towards a world of very heavily developed, very powerful, kind of universal agents that are the main front end for engaging with clients. And it makes sense, right? If you think about, websites and phone lines and every other way that companies have tried to use technology to let us talk to them, they eventually really, really put a lot of focus into those. They want to be present. They want to have an excellent experience. They want to put a lot of stuff in front of you, but nothing is better than just talking to a person, right? A super knowledgeable, incredible. It's why like all the work that banks have done for the last 60 years to, replace the client manager, replace the teller with ATMs, with websites, with mobile apps, with phone lines, with automated phone lines. All of that, in theory, is about to get wiped away by simply rebuilding the teller in an amazingly powerful way as an LLM-powered agent, and suddenly giving it to people everywhere they are, whether they're in your bank, whether they're on a browser, whether they're next to their phone. They just be like, hey, Siri, how much money is in my bank? What's going on with this transaction? How much am I spending on blank? Can you figure out how to cancel Netflix? Whatever it is that you want to do. And so I think you're going to see the rise of really, really powerful, really good AI agents really quickly. And all the clients are going to support them because they're all supporting MCP. And so that protocol is going to be how we deliver those powerful agents.
Yeah, wonderful. I mean, that sounds like a lot of exciting work that's coming on, supported by MCP, and MCP is probably becoming the new HTTP or HTTPS.
It really is. I mean, and that's what's so powerful is like I think about this all the time, but it's like all an engineer need is sort of like a defined protocol, and they can almost move the world, right? So that's why I think this MCP thing wasn't really built to be the agent framework, and it's not an agent framework, and yet all the agent frameworks are going to support it as the front end, and all of the frameworks are going to allow you to build agents that can talk MCP because the clients are going to support it. And so once the clients support it, they want to support it. We've already demoed this. Like we're right now working with 2 or 3 companies on building these sort of next generation agents that are themselves MCP servers using Nanobot. So I think there's going to be a real flow of, holy crap, if we don't move quickly, we're going to get left behind by our competitors who are, dominating our industry by having by far the best AI assistant for it.
Yeah. Shannon, you're right. I mean, I saw some research that one AI age or agentic AI year is equal to 7 internet years, right? So that's how fast it's moving, 7 times faster. So yeah, companies don't have time. They just have to move on.
It's much easier to build this stuff too because the APIs are all there, right? Like we've already digitized the processes. So now building a new front end to those isn't any harder than moving from one mobile app to another. And luckily, what's amazing is that LLMs are so rich in their understanding of human interactions that creating an agent like this really doesn't even require a lot of specialized model development or specialized model training. You're really almost better off using a standard LLM combined with a rich set of tools. So these next agents are really going to be a whole bunch of MCPs that align with the kinds of things people want, framed as capabilities to a super MCP that's delivered by the client, by the enterprise or by the company, to the client, which will be anything. Everything will be a client. So everything will be able to talk to these MCP servers.
Yeah, fantastic. Shannon, I mean, this is like fantastic conversation, but we'll move on to the next segment, which is the rapid fire round.
Fire away.
All right. So here's my first question to you. What is one AI technology that you admire most outside of Obat.ai? It can't be a company.
Rapid fire. I love the coding assistants. I am not a developer. My co-founders are all developers, but I have lived in technology my entire life. And so for the first time ever, I can build software, and I'm building amazing software for myself, things I'm super excited about. And just, we're in the early days. There are days of high levels of frustration, but the ability to code up applications in minutes and hours that, would have taken me tens of thousands of dollars of consulting fees to have someone else create for me, I am just loving. I think the coding agents are incredible. V0 from Vercel to code. These are the things I'm using regularly, so I love them.
Yeah, you're right. I use Replit in my personal projects, and it's fantastic
Yeah.
what these tools can do. All right. So move on to the second one. What's a common mistake companies make when setting up AI systems?
I think the most common mistake right now is to limit them so much to just developers. I think people are completely missing the impact that putting AI tooling in the hands of business users is going to have. And the organizations that figure that out the first are going to have a massive, massive advantage over their competitors. Your salespeople, your sales managers, your sales ops people, your marketing ops people, your lawyers, your internal operations groups, finance, not like they don't just need sort of specialized AI tools or, oh, there's an AI tool in Salesforce. That's good enough for the salespeople. They need all the same capabilities you're putting in the hands of developers. They need to be trained to use them, and they need to be unleashed. Let them get creative. Let them build automation. Let them build agents. Let them build assistants for themselves. Let them go crazy and then share these things everywhere internally. Promote the people who create cool things and share it with other people. Give out massive bonuses to the people who adopt AI the fastest. As organizations, if you're not consuming tokens right now at an excitingly high rate, you're probably getting left in the dust by your competitors. Use all the AI tools, get everything in the hands of your users and see what comes out of it, because this is an innovation cyclone, and innovation cyclones are where companies get destroyed and they explode into whole new industries they weren't even expecting. So use it aggressively and put it in more people's hands.
I like the word innovation cyclone. I love that phrase. I'm going to borrow it, Shannon, and I may or may not give credit to you. So pardon me for that.
I'm sure I'm borrowing it from someone else, so
Yeah.
don't feel like you need to.
Awesome. So I move on to the third one. If you had to pick one, speed, safety, or openness, which is the most important in AI platforms?
Oh, it's got to be safety. I think right now we have to focus on, safety, again, it's speed, very close second. Like you have to balance those two things, and not, openness, I think is the least of those importance. Openness is makes sense for some organizations, makes sense, doesn't make sense for others. But safety first, speed second, and openness last. Openness is, to me, as an open source software company, I love building open source, but all for selfish reasons, right? I build open source because it helps us grow faster. It helps us put product in people's hands. Open by its nature is certainly valuable in some cases. Open government, open governance for sort of shared things like protocols. Like there are things that are open that are useful to be open, but in of itself, it's not an intrinsic value to me compared to things like safety and speed.
Yeah, I love that answer, because particularly in today's world, everybody is looking for safety,
Yeah.
right? And that's how trust is built. All right. So moving on to the fourth one. What is one myth about AI security you wish everyone understood better?
One myth about AI security, I think the biggest myth is that we know a little bit already about where the attack vectors are coming from. The truth is, like, this space is moving really fast. And I think that there's a lot of companies out there that are pitching very comprehensive security tools and audits for AI. And I think that those are a lot of those are very creating a very false sense of security. The truth is, this cyclone we're in is moving really quickly. What you need right now is to put a lot of faith in your CISOs, to give them the resources they need to be empowered, and to let them make decisions. I think organizations want to look outside. They want to assume that they can solve this stuff with technology. A lot of the risk is going to be process. A lot of the risk is going to be what people do with these tools. And so lean on the people you already have deployed and trust to focus on security. Don't believe there are some AI security experts out there who suddenly understand this way, way, way better than your team does. Most of the fundamentals of this are the same as always. They're man-in-the-middle attacks. They're claimed identity attacks. They're people who are injecting code into things. The truth is, I think your security teams are well positioned with a lot of the existing tools and investments they've already made to secure this layer of technology, because it's so much built on the last layer of technology, right? It leverages so much of the existing authentication and authorization streams. Like Obat just connects to Okta and Entra and other auth systems. It doesn't reinvent auth. Like I saw a company the other day that's like, we're reinventing auth for the AI era, and it's like, well, that might work, but I think that the existing investment in tooling here is excellent, and it just needs to be applied. It doesn't really need to be thrown out and a whole new auth layer developed. We've got OAuth. We've got a lot of the right tools. OAuth 2.0 is a good framework. It gives us almost everything we need. Stay where you're, focused on the things that work and drive it forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. Makes sense. All right. And then the last one, the fifth one that I have for you is, what do you think is a must-have skill for someone building reliable AI systems?
Must-have skill for reliable AI systems. Well, I think, curiosity is probably the must-have skill for everything to do with AI right now. Be curious, be super, how does this work? What's actually happening behind the scenes? Where does this data go? Who would we be giving this to? What else can you do with it? Ask the questions. Those things will give you, the same questions you would have asked when mobile was taking off and you had questions about that. Trust the senior people in your org. Like, you've seen it before. I think I'm always amazed how often people are like, oh, there's a new thing. We've got to go find a whole new branch, a new tranche of people to come in to take on the problem. It's so similar, right? Like the knowledge that your graybeards like me have that have been around security for 25 years and have been, dealing with web application firewalls and dealing with identity before and have been dealing with, this types of challenges. Trust them, talk to them, ask them the questions. They will provide you with most of the answers you need. Be curious though. What's happening? That will tell you a lot of, as you try to understand what the potential risks are.
Wonderful. Thank you, Shannon. That brings us toward the end of the show. Thank you so much for your time.
Arun, it was great being on here, man. I appreciate the invite, and you do a great job with this.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Shannon.
Have a great one.